Hello students and welcome to this video on chapter 3.3 costs and revenue, and this is video 1 of 2 in this chapter. So this is the third chapter in the topic 3, which is called finance and accounts, and the syllabus looks like this. So we're going to go through different types of costs and also look at revenue as well. And in this video we're going to start with revenue, and in the second video we're going to look at different costs. So before we look at revenue and costs, we're going to just briefly talk about something called profit. And in this chapter, we're going to go through profit, but also later on, especially in chapter 3.4, you're going to look at profit in a lot more detail. So what I've got here is I've got some finances from Mercedes-Benz. And in here, this is from 2021. And so what we can see, 2021 and 2022. So you can see that in Q1, quarter 1, 2022, the sales, they told us the sales were 487,000. So what that means is they sold 487 units. And by units, they mean cars here. When we look at revenue, revenue is what's the value of those 487,000 cars. And you can see that their revenue, the value of those sales was 25.8 billion. So they were able to collect that amount of money from their customers. We can also look over here, something called the EBIT. This is earnings before interest and tax. This is another way of basically saying profit. You can see they made a profit of 4.2 billion euros. So we're going to be looking at all of these during this chapter. So let's firstly define revenue. So revenue is the income received from the sale of a good or service. So when Mercedes-Benz sells a car, then they collect money from the customer. So revenue is the total amount of money that they receive from selling their cars. So in the context of Mercedes, they're selling goods. We can also calculate that as price times quantity sold. So this is a formula. Total revenue equals the price of the product times the number they sold. So we saw that Mercedes-Benz sells a number of 100,000 cars, and they're going to be selling them for a price. And so all we do is we multiply the price times the quantity, and that should give us the total revenue. For example, let's talk about a fictional coffee shop called Johnson Java. So this is a coffee shop that sells coffee for €3 a cup, and they sell 600 cups a week. So what we could do is we could calculate that their revenue for the week. All we do is we multiply the 600 cups a week, and we multiply that by 3 because they sell it for 3 for each cup. And therefore, they make €1,800 a week from selling coffee. Now, what we can do is we can create what's called a revenue schedule, and we can look at if they sold different amounts, different numbers of cups of coffee, what would the revenue be under those different scenarios? So again, all we do is we do P times Q, price times the number sold. So if they sold 0, then obviously the revenue would be 0. If they sold 200, then the revenue would be 600. And that's calculated as we just do the price of 3 multiplied by the number sold, which is 200. If they sold 400, then they'd make 1,200, etc., up to if they sold 1,000 cups of coffee a week, they'd make a mighty €3,000 in revenue. And what I've done is I've graphed this. So you can see that on the x-axis, we've got quantity of cups of coffee sold, Q, quantity. And then on the y-axis, we've got revenue, P times Q. So you can see that when they sell 0 cups, then obviously the revenue is 0. And then the more cups they sell, then the more revenue they make. And the revenue curve will go up in this case. In this case, the revenue will go up in a linear fashion because the price of the coffee is not changing. So basically, you can see that the gradient is line will effectively be 3 because that's the price. Okay, so what we can do now is look at different revenue streams. So revenue streams are basically all the ways in which a business gets money from different business activities. So the most common way for businesses to get money is by selling goods and services. So for Johnson Java, they're selling coffee. That's the biggest way that they're going to collect money. But there are other ways in which businesses can make money, and these are called different revenue streams. So how else can businesses generate revenue? Well, maybe the business has a website and they can advertise. In Johnson Java, other businesses could advertise within the shop, and I'd be able to collect money that way. What about selling T-shirts or key rings? So Mercedes-Benz, for example, I think I think they give away them. I'm not sure, but they certainly will make money through merchandise and other types of things. Transaction fees. So when you buy the product, there may well be additional fees that go with that purchase, and maybe you have to pay a certain amount for using a credit card or something like that. And then maybe sponsorship. So some businesses can be sponsored by other businesses and they can raise money through that. Certainly football teams will be able to make money through sponsorship. So if we look at Johnson Java as an example, maybe as well as selling coffee, they could also sell fruit juices. They could sell cakes and bagels. They could sell magazines within the shop. And again, they could sell advertising space as well. And of course, they could sell T-shirts. And over here, I've designed a lovely Johnson Java T-shirt. And they'd be able to sell that in the coffee shop and make a bit of money on that as well. So to show you two examples of famous businesses that have different revenue streams. So we look at Apple, for example. This is from Q4 2021. So they make just over half their revenue from the iPhones. Their revenue is 365 billion. They make about 8% from iPads, 10% from Macs, 10% from wearables such as iWatches, etc. And something which is becoming more important to a lot of these tech companies is services. So things like Apple Care, Apple Pay, Apple TV, Music, etc. And that's almost up now at around 19%. From the amount of revenue that they collect. And I suspect that over time, this will get bigger and bigger. If we look at a football club, so this is Manchester United. So I think this is quite interesting. Firstly, you can see between 2006 and 2017, their revenue increased from 165 million up to 581 million. So they more than tripled their revenue over a 11-year period, which is pretty remarkable and shows how football has really grown as a business in this time period. What I think is also interesting is this shows the different revenue streams that Manchester United have. So back in 2006, 43% was match day. So this would be the tickets that people buy to actually go to the game, the food that they buy, etc. Commercial is sponsorship, T-shirts, football shirts, etc., things like that. And broadcasting would be the TV money that they collect for TV companies wanting to show their games on TV. And not only has the revenue increased, but you can see how the commercial revenue has gone from 28% of their revenue up to 48% of their revenue. And again, this really shows how the football clubs have very much become a brand. And so I think Manchester United has really tried to push their brand around the world, especially in Asia. And so they're able to sell more football shirts, etc., around the world. So I think this shows this really nicely. Okay, finally, what are some brief pros and cons of having different revenue streams? Well, having multiple revenue streams firstly allows them to generate extra revenue. So Manchester United, through their commercial, are able to just get more money, which is obviously a big positive. They also don't have to rely on one source of revenue as much. So you could say that if less people started going to football games, then Manchester United would still make money from broadcasting and their commercial deals as well, and sponsorship, etc. I guess the only negative is it may distract the business from its core focus. So if Johnson Java started selling magazines and bagels and things like that, it's possible that the business might forget about the fact that they're a coffee shop, and possibly the coffee might go down in quality. Not necessarily, but it's something that the business would need to be aware of. Okay, that's it for revenue and revenue streams. I'll see you in the next video for costs.